Imagine standing on a hill outside Washington, D.C., in the heavy heat of August 1814. You look toward the city, and the sky is not dark. It is burning. A brutal orange glow rises over the horizon. The Capitol is in flames. The president's house is a torch. And the President of the United States is nowhere near the safety of power. He is riding through the darkness of Virginia, wondering whether the nation he helped build is being erased before his eyes. This was the War of 1812, a war many would later call the Second War of Independence. And on this night, the young republic came closer than ever to humiliation. It was a night of panic, a night of courage, and, as many Americans saw it then, a night touched by Providence itself. But before the fire, there was a decision, and before the decision, there was a man who refused to let the country break. James Madison was not a warrior. He was a thinker, a writer, a constitutional architect. At 63 years old, he was small in stature, soft-spoken, and never the sort of man anyone imagined riding toward cannon fire. And yet, as British forces moved toward the capital, Madison did something remarkable. He mounted a horse, he carried pistols, and he went toward the front, not to command an army, but to witness the defense of his city with his own eyes. What he found at Bladensburg was chaos. The American militia was overwhelmed, poorly trained, poorly positioned, and terrified by British rockets screaming through the air like something from another world. The battle collapsed so quickly that people later mocked it as the Bladensburg races. Madison remained near the field until the danger was almost on top of him. Then he turned and raced back, not merely in retreat, but in warning. He was riding to tell his wife that the British were coming. And this time they were coming all the way to the White House. Inside the White House, Dolley Madison was waiting. She had set a dinner for the president and his cabinet. But the guests who arrived were not statesmen. They were messengers, breathless, panicked, warning that the British were close. Dolley Madison could have fled immediately. Anyone would have understood. But she stayed. And in that moment, she showed a kind of courage that history never forgets. Because she knew exactly what had to be saved. Not the furniture, not the silver, the symbol, the full-length portrait of George Washington. It was bolted to the wall. She ordered the frame broken, the canvas cut free, rolled up, carried out. She was saving more than a painting. She was saving the image of the man who had given the Republic its beginning. Only after that did she finally leave. She climbed into a carriage and vanished into the Maryland woods, leaving behind a set table, a warm meal, and a house that would soon belong to the enemy. When British troops entered Washington, they found a city nearly emptied of its leaders. Their commander, Admiral George Cockburn, and General Robert Ross did not come merely to defeat the Americans. They came to wound them, to disgrace them, to humiliate the new republic in front of the world. Inside the White House, they found the table still set. And in one of the most insulting moments in American history, the British sat down and ate the president's dinner. Then they got to work. Furniture was stacked. Papers were thrown together. Books were gathered. The rooms of the president's house were turned into fuel. And then the flames began. Within minutes, the White House was burning from the inside out. The British moved on to the Capitol. There, they did the same thing. They piled books from the Library of Congress. They fed the fire with the very tools of democracy. And then they watched as the symbols of American government cracked, blackened, and collapsed. For a moment, It seemed as if the young nation itself might be nothing more than a failed experiment. And then, the sky changed. The next day, the heat broke. The air turned violent. A massive storm rolled over Washington with shocking force. Wind, rain, thunder. A furious wall of weather crashed into the city. To the British, it must have felt almost supernatural. Cannons were thrown off balance. Trees were ripped from the ground. Roofs were torn apart. And the fire that had devoured the president's house and the Capitol was driven back by the storm's pounding rain. People who lived through it later described it as an act of providence. One of those local stories says that when a woman was asked whether such weather was normal, she replied that it was special intervention meant to drive the invaders away. Whether legend or not, the meaning was clear. The British had come to burn Washington. Instead, nature itself seemed to rise against them. Battered, shaken, and no longer interested in pressing deeper into the city, they withdrew to their ships. The Capitol was scarred, but it was not gone. When James Madison returned to Washington 3 days later, he found a ruin. The White House was a shell. The Capitol was shattered. Ash still hung in the air. For many men in Congress, the answer seemed obvious. Move the Capitol. Go somewhere safer. Somewhere less embarrassing. Somewhere less exposed. But Madison understood something more important than convenience. He understood symbols. If the Capitol moved, then the British had won more than a raid. They had broken the nation's confidence. So Madison refused to surrender the city. He stayed at the Octagon House. He kept working. He pushed forward. And he insisted that Washington be rebuilt exactly where it stood. The president's house would rise again. Later, to hide the blackened scars left by the fire, the building was painted white. And slowly, the name that had once been informal became permanent. The White House, what had been a symbol of destruction, became a symbol of endurance. Madison turned humiliation into defiance, and defeat into resolve. We often remember leadership in terms of victory, a speech, a battle, a triumph. But sometimes leadership is something quieter. Sometimes it is the refusal to run when the world is burning around you. James Madison was not a soldier president. He was not larger than life. He was a man who lived through one of the darkest nights in early American history and still chose to rebuild. And Dolley Madison, in one of the great acts of First Lady courage, made sure the country did not lose the pieces of its founding soul. They proved something America has had to prove again and again, that a nation is not held together by buildings. It is held together by resolve. So the next time you see the White House, remember what lies beneath that white paint. The scars of 1814, the night Washington burned, and the moment the country refused to burn with it. Now that is a story worth remembering. If this chapter of American resilience stayed with you, subscribe to the President's Stories, because history is full of nights like this, and they are still waiting to be told.